Why did no one look her in the eyes that morning? Maybe it was the altitude. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, too quiet, too precise, too out of place. The air at forward operating base Nightingale bit hard at 11,000 feet, thin and sharp enough to taste like iron. It cut through uniforms and pride alike. Wind screamed down the valley, clawing at metal siding and snapping at the flags that no one saluted anymore. The base was built for endurance, not beauty. Gray insulated containers bolted into permafrost, each one trembling with the sound of generators. A place for men who preferred action over conversation and silence over sleep. And somewhere among them stood warrant officer Anna Sharma. She didn't belong, not in the way they meant it anyway. Her frame looked small against the backdrop of hulking C-130s and the towering ridges beyond. A clipboard in one hand, a pen clipped neatly in the other, she looked like paperwork personified. The kind of person soldiers mocked because they couldn't imagine her surviving 10 minutes outside the wire. Yet there she was on the slush-covered tarmac at dawn, coat zipped to her throat, eyes hidden under the brim of her cap, watching, calculating, absorbing. A Hercules transport rumbled overhead, its propellers screaming as pallets rolled down the ramp. Ammunition crates, medical supplies, and finally something delicate, a series of climate-controlled containers glowing with warning lights, fragile, handle with care, temp-sensitive. She checked each one with the focus of a surgeon. Her movements were small, controlled, each checkmark an act of discipline. A voice broke through the noise, young, confident, careless. "Look at her," Lieutenant Evans muttered from the doorway of the command tent, smirking under the fur of his hood. "Probably thinks a firefight is when two requisitions get denied at the same time." The older man beside him, Sergeant Reyes, didn't laugh. His face was weathered, his eyes old enough to recognize something others missed. He watched Sharma longer than he should have. Watched the way her gaze moved beyond the crates to the ground crew's grips, the frost on the cables, the angle of the forklift's tines. Watched her eyes lift to the ridgeline and pause, reading something in the wind itself. There was calm in her stillness, but not the fragile kind. The kind that belongs to people who have seen too much chaos and survived it. "Don't," Reyes said finally, "don't underestimate that one." Evans snorted. "She's logistics, she moves boxes." Reyes kept his gaze steady. "Yeah, maybe." A horn blared. Engines roared. The last pallet rolled down the ramp, heavier than the rest, stamped with bold black letters. Hydra Array Prototype, handle with care. That was the mission's heart. Without it, they were blind. Sharma moved closer, breath misting in the cold. She guided the forklift into position, one hand lifted slightly, as if she could feel the vibration of the sensitive machinery inside. The moment the crate touched the heated transport, she relaxed only by degrees. That's when the storm walked in. A Humvee screeched to a stop, gravel and ice spraying across the tarmac. The passenger door slammed open and out stepped General Marcus Thorne, a bull of a man with a voice that had carved obedience into generations of soldiers. His presence changed the air itself. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every man on the tarmac stiffened. He scanned the scene like a hawk searching for prey, then fixed his eyes on her. "Is that it?" he barked. "The package secure?" "Yes, General," Sharma replied, steady, almost disarmingly calm. "Being transferred to the secure lab for calibration." "Every component accounted for?" "Yes, sir, triple-checked." Thorne grunted, a sound like gravel grinding under steel. "It better be. I've got men about to risk their lives based on that gear, if a single thing's missing." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to, his glare did the rest. She didn't blink. He turned, coat snapping in the wind, and stormed toward the command tent. His aides scrambled behind him, clutching papers that fluttered like frightened birds. Sharma watched him go, expression unreadable, posture unbent, and made one last notation on her clipboard. The pencil's scratch was lost in the howl of the mountain wind. Then she followed him inside. The briefing room hummed with heat and tension. It was a box of metal and noise, servers whirring, heaters groaning, boots shifting on cold steel floors. In the middle of the room floated a holographic map, blue light painting ghostly peaks across tired faces. General Thorne stood before it, hands clasped behind his back, voice low but edged with iron. Intel says the target's dug in at Zerithos Monastery. Sheer cliffs on 3 sides, one narrow approach. We'll deploy Task Force Chimera from the East Ridge under cover of night. He stabbed a finger at the glowing image. Our eyes and ears will be the Hydra array. Once calibrated, it'll give us a full 3D scan of the terrain. No surprises. Then came the pause, that silent prelude to trouble. "Sir," the communications officer stammered, "the primary focusing lens, it's not responding. Looks like damage during transit." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Damaged?" Thorne repeated, his tone suddenly lethal. "I was told the package was secure." Every head turned toward Sharma. Her voice, when it came, was level, almost gentle. "Every component was verified, sir. No impact readings, no temperature variance during flight or offload." Evans muttered from the back, "Maybe she checked the wrong box." The insult landed like a spark in dry grass. Thorne's fury found its mark. He crossed the room in 3 strides until he was towering over her, a mountain of muscle and metals. "You personally signed for that pallet, warrant officer. You assured me everything was accounted for. Now my texts say our most critical asset is junk. Are you calling my people liars?" "No, sir." Her tone didn't waver. "I'm saying the data doesn't support." "Data?" Thorne barked a harsh laugh. "I don't give a damn about your data. My men are going in blind because you filled out your paperwork wrong." He slammed his fist onto the console. The monitors flickered. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Do you even understand what's at stake? The lives of my operators, 6 months of planning." His words came faster, sharper, until the last one cut deepest. "You're useless." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Evans froze, his smirk dying on his lips. Sharma didn't move, didn't flinch. She stood at perfect attention, eyes fixed forward, voice calm when it finally came. "Yes, General." And then she turned, walked out. The door hissed shut behind her. No one breathed for several seconds. Thorne's anger still vibrated in the air, but beneath it was something else, an emptiness he refused to name. He thought he'd broken her. He had no idea he just tested the wrong kind of metal. Outside, the wind howled again, erasing footprints almost as quickly as they were made. The mission clock ticked on. They went in blind, they had to. Hours later, rotor blades tore through the storm clouds as Task Force Chimera lifted off into a sky gone white with fury. Evans sat in the helicopter's dim light, checking his gear with shaking hands he pretended weren't shaking. Reyes caught his eye, that same unreadable calm as before. "She was too calm," Reyes murmured. "Scared stiff, you mean?" Reyes shook his head slowly. "No, not fear, patience." Outside, the mountains swallowed the sound of their departure. Within an hour, the storm came down like a living thing. Snow driven by hurricane winds, visibility near zero. The world became white noise and blindness. Back at Fob Nightingale, communications began to fail, static crawling through every channel. Drone feeds died. Satellites went silent. In the command tent, Thorne paced like a caged lion, fists clenching and unclenching. He could feel it, something had gone wrong. And high on the ridge, miles away, Task Force Chimera walked into the storm. Wind howled like sirens. The cold gnawed at flesh through their thermal suits. GPS flickered uselessly. Thermal optics showed nothing but endless gray. They were ghosts on a mountain of ghosts. And then the first shot came. A whisper-quiet crack. The point man fell without sound. Then another. White-clad figures rose from the snow around them, enemy fighters, perfectly camouflaged, blades and silenced rifles flashing in the blur. Chaos erupted, muted by snow. Men shouted, slipped, fired into nothing. Reyes yanked Evans behind a rock outcropping, round-stitching the snow where they'd just been. "They knew our route," Reyes shouted over the storm. "They knew exactly where we'd come up." Evans's breath came ragged. "That's impossible." But it was. Someone had fed the enemy their path. Within minutes, the elite of Task Force Chimera were pinned, bleeding, freezing, the mountain itself turning against them. Their technology failed. Their training frayed. The storm devoured sound, light, and hope. Back at Nightingale, General Thorne stared at dead monitors, hearing nothing but the wind and the hollow thud of his own pulse. He had sent them to their deaths. And he didn't know it yet, but the only person who could still save them was the one he'd just called useless. Why would someone disobey a direct order in the middle of a blizzard? At Forward Operating Base Nightingale, the storm had turned from obstacle to living creature, pounding, breathing, screaming across the mountains. The sky was gone, the horizon erased. What remained was the sound of generators straining against the cold and men whispering prayers into dead radios. Inside the command tent, the world had shrunk to static. Every monitor flickered, every frequency drowned in white noise. General Marcus Thorne stood at the center of it all, a figure carved from frustration and fear. His hands gripped the edge of the operations table until his knuckles went white. "Try it again," he barked. A technician twisted dials, his lips trembling. "Sir, the uplink's completely down. Even the relay drones can't cut through the ion surge. We've lost every channel." The words hit Thorne harder than he expected. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It was accusing. He had ordered Chimera to deploy blind. Now he could almost hear them dying in that storm. He turned away, jaw set, eyes burning holes into the map display that refused to load. His mind replayed every decision, every barked command, every ounce of pride that had refused to listen to the quiet woman with the clipboard. He didn't see her again until the young comms tech burst through the tent flap, face pale as frost. "Sir, you need to see this." Thorne spun on him. "Did you find them?" "No, sir, it's Warrant Officer Sharma. She's in the secondary comm shack. The boy swallowed hard. She locked herself inside." "What?" "She's rerouting power from the main grid. She's trying to activate the Phoenix terminal." The name froze the air. Carlson, the general's aide, looked up sharply. "The Phoenix? That system's offline, decommissioned for instability. It could blow the entire base's circuits." Thorne's fury rose fast, a shield against the deeper emotion clawing up his throat, fear. "Who authorized her?" "No one, sir." Thorne's eyes narrowed. Then she's about to learn what unauthorized means. He was out of the tent in seconds, snow swallowing his boots, Carlson struggling to keep pace. The wind lashed their faces, ice needling through skin. Somewhere beyond the swirling white, the faint thrum of redirected power hummed underfoot. The secondary comm shack stood apart from the main compound. A single container bolted to the permafrost, lights flickering through the blizzard like a heartbeat. Thorne's voice thundered across the gale. "Warrant Officer Sharma, open this door, that's an order." No answer, only the hum, deep, steady, growing stronger. He slammed his fist against the metal. "Sharma, you'll fry the whole damn base." Still silence. Inside, Anna Sharma sat before a wall of green glowing screens, stripped of her parka, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her fingers flew across the keyboard in precise rhythm, the kind of rhythm born from obsession, not panic. Lines of code cascaded down one monitor while another displayed atmospheric readouts spiking and dipping in real time. The Phoenix terminal wasn't a standard system. It was a relic, a labyrinth of analog dials and digital ghosts. It had been built for one purpose, to punch a signal through chaos when every modern frequency failed. But it demanded sacrifice, power, precision, and the kind of nerve only a handful of people on Earth possessed. Her breathing stayed even, her thoughts were surgical. The storm's electromagnetic pulse jammed every channel, but storms were predictable in their own chaotic way. There were brief moments, mere seconds, when the ionosphere shifted just right, creating a narrow corridor where a signal could slip through. Most comm officers didn't even know those ducts existed. But Anna did. She'd found them before, in a past she no longer spoke about. The temperature inside the shack rose as power surged. Frost melted off the walls and refroze seconds later. The air smelled of ozone and heated metal. Her fingers never slowed. She rewired protocols by instinct, disabled failsafes, redirected auxiliary power from lighting, heating, even the drone maintenance bay. Every watt mattered. Outside, Thorne's anger mixed with dread. Coulson, cut the power now. Sir, if we kill the grid while she's mid-transfer. I said cut it. But Coulson didn't move. His voice trembled. Sir, you should see something first. He held up his tablet, shielding it from the snow. The screen displayed a document marked classified, EYES only. I pulled her unredacted file, he said quietly. You might want to know who you're ordering us to arrest. I don't care if she's the Secretary of Defense. Sir, Coulson stepped closer, forcing the tablet into Thorne's gloved hands. Read it. The general's glare faltered. The first line made his stomach twist. Sharma Anna, Warrant Officer 4. Primary Specialty, Official, 920B, Supply Systems Technician. Primary Specialty, Actual. Eyes only / Omega Clearance 18A, Special Forces Warrant Officer. Thorne's breath caught. 18A, the designation of Special Forces operators who taught elite teams how to survive the impossible. He scrolled. Previous unit classified Addendum 7, Wraith Program. The words blurred as the wind tore at the screen, but the commendations that followed were clear enough. For extraordinary heroism during Operation Nightfall Serpent. For conspicuous gallantry under fire. For re-establishing communications after all systems failed, saving 42 lives. And then the last line. Call sign, Wraith. The legend whispered about in every black briefing room. The ghost operative who could disappear into a war zone and pull people out of hell. Thorne stared at the metal door, the rage inside him collapsing under a different weight. Shame. He'd called her useless. And she'd said nothing, because she'd learned long ago that real strength didn't shout. Inside, the hum peaked. Anna Sharma tuned the Phoenix terminal like a pianist coaxing life from an untuned instrument. She'd already run diagnostics on the Hydra lens hours earlier, noticed inconsistencies no one else had. The lens hadn't been damaged, it had been tampered with. Hidden inside its circuitry was a microbeacon, a Trojan feeding positional data to someone who should not have known their route. She quarantined it quietly, filed a red flag report to intelligence. It had vanished into bureaucracy. Now her worst fear was playing out. The enemy knew Chimera's path. She typed faster, overriding old encryption firewalls, weaving her own code from muscle memory. The symbols on the screen formed a language that hadn't existed in official manuals for years. Ghost code, used only by deep cover units when all other protocols were compromised. A low warning tone pulsed, power nearing threshold. She adjusted voltage manually. Sparks jumped from the control panel, biting at her fingers. She didn't react. Her world had narrowed to one goal: find a window in the storm and send a signal through. On the other side of that storm, men were dying. Inside the shack, sweat beaded on her temple despite the cold. She mapped the terrain from memory, cross-referencing topography, wind shear, avalanche data. Every instinct, every scar from her past guided her hands. There a narrow ravine, hidden, winding, dangerous but passable, the Serpent's Tooth. She'd been there once years ago, on a mission that had ended in silence and metals no one ever mentioned. She encoded the path into a microburst transmission, compressed coordinates, live enemy markers drawn from the stolen Hydra diagnostics she'd isolated before they were corrupted. But data wasn't enough, they had to trust it. So she added one final element, an authentication sequence known only to ghosts. 9 break Sierra, break 9. It meant I am one of you. My intel is gold, trust it as you trust your own blood. She hit transmit. The Phoenix terminal screamed, a sound like metal tearing through the atmosphere. For less than a second, a surge of energy flared across the base, lights dimming. Then silence. The signal was gone. Anna exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the storm radar. Somewhere out there, if she'd timed it right, that burst of static had reached the unreachables. On the mountain, Sergeant Reyes crouched in the snow, pressing a hand against a wounded soldier's side, trying to feel a pulse through numb fingers. Then his helmet comm crackled. A sound, not a voice, just a distorted digital shriek. Screep bip hop. He frowned. Interference, he thought. Then it came again, a rhythm buried in the noise. 9 break Sierra, break 9. Reyes froze, his eyes widened. He hadn't heard that sequence in over a decade. He ripped the connector from his helmet and plugged it into his wrist display. A small blue line flickered to life, a path, winding through the terrain ahead, alive with enemy markers updating in real time. Impossible. Another pulse. 3 words appeared on the screen. Serpent's Tooth, move now. Evans crawled beside him, voice hoarse. What is it? What are you looking at? Reyes's lips trembled, not from cold, from disbelief. It's a ghost signal, he whispered. Evans blinked. A what? A lifeline, Reyes said, eyes hardening. He looked at the wounded, at the dead, at the storm that wanted them all. We move, now. He didn't wait for approval. He wasn't following the lieutenant anymore. He was following her. Back at the base, General Thorne stood frozen in the snow, tablet still in his hand, eyes locked on the shack. The speaker above the door hissed once, then fell silent. Inside, Anna Sharma leaned back, exhausted, fingers trembling. She'd done what she could. Whether it reached them or not, that was up to fate and the wind. Behind her, the door clanged open. Thorne filled the frame, breath steaming, eyes wide, not with anger now, but with something heavier. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply stood there, looking at her. This quiet woman surrounded by humming machinery and the faint blue glow of impossible hope. The same woman he'd humiliated hours earlier. And for the first time in years, Marcus Thorne, the man who'd faced down enemies and never blinked, felt small. He lowered his voice. What did you just do? Sharma didn't turn. Her eyes stayed on the monitors. Trying to bring them home, sir. Outside, the storm screamed louder, but somewhere inside that chaos, a message had broken through. The screen behind her flickered, faint signals, moving dots. Thorne stepped closer, watching as blue icons, his men began to shift direction. He didn't yet know how, or why, or even if it would work. But for the first time all night, the storm didn't sound like the end of everything. It sounded like the beginning of redemption. How do you follow a voice that doesn't speak? How do you trust a signal that shouldn't exist? The men of Task Force Chimera didn't have answers. Only the snow, the wind, and the ghost in their comms. Reyes led the way. The ravine ahead, barely visible through the blizzard, twisted like a serpent carved from ice. The path was narrow, treacherous, sometimes no wider than a single boot's edge. One wrong step, and a man would vanish into a white abyss that never gave bodies back. But Reyes walked like he'd been there before. The faint blue line on his wrist display pulsed with life, a living thread that refused to die. Each time the storm howled loud enough to drown their own thoughts, That line seemed to steady them, whispering direction through chaos. Behind him, Evans stumbled, dragging a wounded soldier's arm over his shoulder. The young lieutenant's face was a mask of blood and frost, but pride burned through his exhaustion. "This better not be a trick," he muttered, half to himself. Reyes didn't answer. He didn't need to. The ghost had earned his trust the moment it saved them from another ambush. Because it had. 20 minutes earlier, the signal had pulsed again, a sharp double beat on Reyes' wrist display, right before a cluster of red blips appeared ahead. Enemy movement. Without hesitation, he'd ordered a detour down a steep ice shelf. Moments later, gunfire erupted above, bullets shredding the trail they'd been walking seconds before. Luck maybe. But Reyes didn't believe in luck anymore. He believed in the impossible. The team moved in silence. Every breath turned to vapor, every movement creaked under frozen gear. Frost coated their weapons, eyelids, lips. The world had become one endless heartbeat of survival, thud, breath, step. Thud, breath, step. Reyes' voice crackled through their comms. "Stay close, trust the line, we're not out yet." Evans wanted to argue, to reclaim command, but words felt useless now. He followed because in that moment, hierarchy didn't matter. The mountain didn't care about rank. And somewhere above the storm, the ghost watched them move. At Forward Operating Base Nightingale, the command tent looked like a shrine to tension. The lights flickered. The air smelled of burnt wiring. Monitors glowed faintly with data streams that only one person could understand. Anna Sharma sat in front of the Phoenix console, posture straight, face pale under the green light. She hadn't moved in over an hour, except to type or adjust the analog dials. Sweat traced slow lines down her temple despite the cold. Behind her stood General Thorne, silent now. The rage that once defined him had dissolved into something quieter, a humility born of realization. He watched her fingers dance across the keys, commanding a battlefield she couldn't see. Every few seconds, new telemetry blinked to life, faint returns bouncing off the terrain, distorted echoes reconstructed by her mind faster than any computer could manage. "She's guiding them," whispered Major Carlson, standing near the back of the tent. His voice trembled with awe. "She's reading the storm." Sharma didn't react. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen, where blue icons, Chimera's remaining men, crawled through the digital snow. She adjusted power flow to maintain the uplink, sacrificing base systems one by one. First went the external floodlights, then the drone charging banks, then heating to half capacity. "Warrant officer," Thorne said quietly, "you're freezing the base." "Better us than them, sir." Her voice was steady, flat, the kind of calm that had nothing to do with confidence and everything to do with purpose. Thorne looked at her for a long moment. He could see the strain under the stillness, the slight tremor in her hands, the dark crescents under her eyes, but she never complained, never paused. Every second she bought them cost her another piece of herself. Out on the mountain, that sacrifice was keeping men alive. "Contact front," Reyes hissed, diving behind a rock outcropping. Muzzle flashes erupted through the storm, faint orange ghosts in the blinding white. The team returned fire, bullets disappearing into the gale. Then Reyes' display pulsed again. 2 short bursts. "Move east now." He didn't hesitate. He motioned with his hand and the team pivoted, vanishing into a narrow crevice between slabs of ice. The enemy's fire swept through the space they'd just vacated. Evans pressed his back against the frozen wall, chest heaving. "How the hell does she know where they are?" Reyes shook his head. "Doesn't matter, she knows." For a brief moment, their eyes met, 2 soldiers from different worlds, both realizing they owed their lives to a woman they'd once dismissed. "She's not just some quartermaster," Reyes said quietly. "She's running the op from behind that storm." Evans swallowed hard. "Then what the hell is she?" Reyes gave a faint, grim smile. "A ghost." Inside the shack, Anna's console flickered violently. The power grid screamed under the strain. Red warnings filled the edges of her screen. She ignored them. Her mind moved faster than the machine, adjusting, recalibrating, counterbalancing power surges. Her fingers blurred. Thorne leaned forward. "You're pushing it too far." "If I don't, the window closes." "Window." The ion ducked. "It's collapsing. I've got maybe 5 minutes before the atmosphere shuts me out." "Then what happens?" She looked up, finally meeting his eyes. "Then they're gone." Thorne didn't speak after that. He didn't know what to say. The guilt sat heavy in his chest, the memory of his words echoing louder than the storm outside. "You useless BTCH." Now, watching her save his men one packet of code at a time, he wished he could erase that moment. But words once spoken don't melt in the cold. They freeze. They stay. Reyes' team reached a small plateau. The storm thinned just enough for the faint glow of dawn to bleed through, gray light over shattered ridges. They were down to 6 men, 3 wounded, all exhausted. Reyes crouched, scanning the ravine ahead. His comm crackled once, a faint static, then 3 words flickered across his wrist screen. "Wind shift incoming, brace." He barely had time to shout, "Cover," before a gust roared through the canyon, toppling men to their knees. But it also carried something else, the low, distant rumble of falling rock. The sound grew into a roar, an avalanche. Snow and ice tore free from the cliffs above, cascading like the mountain itself had decided to bury them alive. Reyes' heart pounded. There was nowhere to run. Then another pulse. Downslope cavity 30 meters, move. He spotted it, a hollow beneath an ice overhang. He grabbed Evans's arm, shouting, "There." They dove together, dragging the wounded inside as the avalanche thundered past, shaking the ground like artillery fire. When the noise finally faded, they were buried in near darkness. Evans coughed, choking on dust and ice. "We'd be dead if—" He stopped himself. He didn't need to finish. They both knew who had saved them. Reyes touched his calm, voice low. "Ghost, this is Chimera. We hear you, keep talking." Back at the shack, Anna exhaled slowly. A single tear slipped from the corner of her eye, vanishing before it could freeze. She didn't respond, but she heard him. And for the first time in years, she let herself feel something she'd long buried. Connection. In the command tent, the atmosphere shifted. Officers who had dismissed her now stood silent, watching as the impossible unfolded on the screens. "She's reading terrain, anticipating enemy patterns, wind bursts, avalanche frequencies," Carlson whispered. "She's running a full tactical C2 operation solo." Thorne didn't reply, he only nodded. Because deep down, he knew he wasn't the commander anymore. He was the witness. Sharma was the one holding the line, not with bullets or bravado, but with intellect, precision, and quiet defiance. The same silence he'd mistaken for weakness was the reason his men might live. He stepped closer, his voice barely above the hum of the terminal. "Tell me what you need." Without looking up, she answered, "Power and silence." He nodded once, turning to the crew. "You heard her. Nobody touches a damn thing without her order. Nobody breathes loud enough to break her focus." The room obeyed. Hours bled together. The storm outside began to lose its fury, its howls softening to tired sighs. Inside, the Phoenix terminal flickered one last time, then stabilized. The faintest of green lights pulsed steady. Sharma's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, watching as the blue markers, Chimera's survivors, reached a final grid point. The extraction zone. She typed one final command. "Chopper en route, hold fast." The transmission vanished into the static. On the mountain, Reyes' display blinked once more. 3 words. "Chopper en route." He looked up, snow caked to his beard, lips cracked. Then, faint at first, came the rhythmic sound they'd all prayed for. Whump, whump, whump. Rotor blades. Evans staggered to his feet, staring into the gray sky as a shape emerged through the thinning veil, a helicopter slicing through the dawn like a promise. They made it. Against every law of nature, they'd made it. Reyes turned toward the mountain's shadow, toward the unseen woman who'd guided them from death to dawn, and whispered two words into the wind. "Thank you." Back at the base, Thorne watched the feed in silence as Chimera's survivors were lifted out of the storm. Relief hit him like an avalanche of its own. He exhaled for the first time in hours. The tent erupted in cheers, but his didn't join. His eyes found the shack beyond the window, still glowing faintly against the mountain's dark edge. "She did it," Coulson murmured. Thorne's jaw tightened. She always could. He didn't explain what he meant. He just stared at that small beacon of light in the cold, and for the first time in years, he felt something strange settle in his chest. Respect. Far across the base, Anna Sharma sat back in her chair, the storm finally quiet outside. The terminal hummed a soft lullaby of victory. Her body trembled from exhaustion. But she didn't smile. She simply looked out the narrow window at the fatting white world, at the dawn she'd earned, and whispered almost to herself, "Mission complete." What does victory sound like when it comes too late to cheer for? At forward operating base Nightingale, dawn came without color. The sun crawled over the jagged ridges like a wounded animal, its light pale and cold. The storm had passed, but it left behind a silence that weighed more than the blizzard ever had. The first helicopter appeared as a speck against the gray. Then another. And another. They came in low, blades thumping heavy in the thin air. The landing pad was a blur of motion, medics, stretchers, diesel fumes, and white breath in the freezing wind. Task Force Chimera was coming home. Or what was left of it. General Thorne stood at the edge of the tarmac, coat flapping in the icy gusts, eyes fixed on the choppers as they touched down one by one. His face was unreadable, carved into something that almost looked calm. But inside, a storm still raged, quieter, colder, and entirely his own. When the first door slid open, Sergeant Reyes stepped out, his arm in a makeshift sling, one side of his face streaked with dried blood. Behind him came Evans, limping, helping two wounded men toward the medics. The rest didn't come out. The dead stayed strapped inside, covered in white tarps that fluttered softly with each gust. No one spoke. The rotor slowed, the noise faded, and in the heavy quiet that followed, it felt as if the whole base was holding its breath. Reyes's eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on Thorne. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Reyes gave a small, deliberate nod, not to salute, not to acknowledge rank, but to confirm a truth both already knew. "We survived. But not because of you." Thorne didn't return the nod. He couldn't. As the medics rushed the wounded away, he turned toward the distant calm shack, where a single light still burned through the pale morning. It hadn't gone out all night. Inside that shack, the world had shrunk to the sound of low humming and slow breathing. Anna Sharma sat slumped in her chair, still wearing her headset, eyes half closed. The Phoenix terminal glowed faintly, its power indicators oscillating like the last flickers of a dying heartbeat. She kept the link open until she'd heard the chopper confirm extraction. Only then had she allowed herself to stop. The fatigue hit her all at once. Every muscle trembled, every thought blurred. Her fingertips were blistered from heat, her lips cracked from the dry air. But none of that mattered. Her mission, the one she'd never been officially assigned, was complete. She'd brought them home. A faint knock came at the door. She didn't answer. The door opened anyway, a flood of cold air spilling into the small space. Thorne stood framed in the light, hat tucked under his arm, snow still clinging to his boots. For once, he didn't look like a general. He looked like a man who'd finally realized the weight of his own words. Sharma didn't turn to face him. Her hands rested on the console, motionless. He waited. Silence stretched. The hum of the phoenix filled it like a pulse between them. "I wanted to see it," he said finally. His voice was low, uncertain. "The machine that saved my men." She didn't look up. It wasn't the machine. Thorne nodded slowly, his breath fogging in the air. No, it was. He took a cautious step forward. The floor creaked under his boots. "I read your file," he said, "the real one." That made her pause. For the first time, she turned to look at him. Her eyes, dark, sharp, unflinching, met his without hostility, only quiet comprehension. "Then you know why I don't like being looked at," she said. He did. He'd seen the blacked-out lines, the commendations that never saw daylight, the trauma reports written by psychologists who tried to define the undefinable. He'd seen the last entry, recommended for reassignment, psychological recovery. A decorated operative, buried in bureaucracy. A warrior disguised as a clerk. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Would you have listened?" The question hit like a bullet. He didn't answer. For a long time, the only sound was the steady hum of the dying equipment. "You saved them," he said finally. "You saved me." Sharma gave a faint, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "I did my job." Thorne wanted to argue, to tell her it was more than that, but something about her expression silenced him. It wasn't humility. It was something else. Something that said, "You'll never understand, and that's okay." He took another slow breath. "I said things yesterday I can't take back." She turned her gaze back to the console. "You were angry. You thought you'd lost control." "I was wrong," he said. The words came heavy, almost reluctant. "And I know an apology doesn't mean much." "No," she said quietly, "it doesn't." He looked down, shame curling through his chest. But before he could speak again, she added, "But it's a start." It was the smallest kindness, but it landed harder than any reprimand. He stood there for a moment longer, unsure of what to do with his hands, his authority, or himself. Then he nodded, not as a superior officer, but as a man acknowledging another's strength. When he finally left, he didn't look back. Sharma sat in silence long after the door closed, the echo of his footsteps fading into the howl of the wind. She didn't feel vindicated, just tired. Outside, the base moved in slow, reverent motion. Soldiers walked softer. Conversations carried a new kind of gravity. Word had already spread. How the logistics officer had rerouted power, hacked an obsolete comm system, and guided Task Force Chimera out of an ambush no one should have survived. No one said her name out loud, not yet. But when her shadow passed, people straightened unconsciously. Respect, unspoken but heavy, followed her like the smell of ozone after lightning. Reyes was the first to find her after the debriefs. His arm was in a cast now, his face wrapped in gauze, but his eyes still burned with the same steady warmth as before. He stopped just inside the shack doorway. "Permission to speak freely?" he asked. Sharma didn't turn from the terminal she was shutting down. "Always." Reyes stepped forward, his boots crunching over frost. "You knew that route, the ravine. No satellite had it mapped. How?" She hesitated before answering. "Because I walked it once, a long time ago." He nodded slowly, absorbing that truth like it was a secret meant to stay buried. "I figured as much." He studied her for a moment, the woman who had saved them all without leaving her chair, and then said softly, "You didn't have to do it. Not after how he treated you." Sharma powered down the last of the Phoenix modules. The hum faded into silence. "I don't do it for him," she said, "or for them." "Then why?" She looked out through the small, frost-lined window at the mountains, their peaks now glowing gold in the early light. "Because someone has to keep count," she said, "of who makes it back." Reyes watched her for a long time, the meaning of her words settling in. Then he gave a small nod, the same one he'd given the general on the tarmac, but this one meant something else entirely. It meant "we see you now." And when he left, the door closing softly behind him, Sharma stood alone again. She liked it that way. That night the base was quieter than usual. The storm had moved east, leaving a brittle calm in its wake. The sky, scrubbed clean, revealed 1,000 cold stars. In the operations tent, reports were filed, commendations drafted, and casualty lists finalized. Numbers, names, everything the military used to measure survival. General Thorne signed each line with mechanical precision, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Every signature felt like penance. He'd been arrogant, blind. He'd seen strength only in volume, in the loudest, the boldest, the most decorated. But Anna Sharma had taught him something he hadn't known he needed to learn. That sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding it together. When he finished, he closed the file and stood. The tent was empty now except for the faint hum of servers. On impulse, he stepped out into the cold, heading toward the logistics bay. He found her exactly where he'd first seen her, in the warehouse, sitting on a crate under the yellow glow of a single work lamp. The light painted her face in soft gold and shadow. Before her lay the disassembled parts of a rifle, not standard issue, not regulation. A precision weapon built by a craftsman. Her hands moved slowly, methodically, oiling the bolt, checking the alignment. The ritual was familiar, healing even. Thorne watched from the doorway unseen. He'd come here with a speech, words carefully arranged to sound sincere but safe. But now, seeing her, he realized words were useless. They were his weapon, not hers. So instead, he walked to the small field kitchen, poured a thermos of strong black coffee, the kind that burned the throat and cleared the mind, and brought it back. He set it down beside her without a word. The metal made a soft, solid sound on the crate. He didn't wait for acknowledgement, didn't demand forgiveness. He just left it there, an offering, a confession wrapped in silence. As he turned to leave, his boots echoing faintly against the concrete, Sharma finally paused her work. She reached for the thermos, her fingers brushing the metal. It was still warm. For a moment she just held it there, feeling the heat seep into her skin, the simple, wordless truth of what it meant. Respect. Finally earned, not spoken. Steam rose from the lid and vanished into the cold air, like a spirit released. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened just slightly. The kind of softness that meant peace. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What breaks a person so completely that silence becomes their only language. Long before the snow, before the base called Nightingale, Anna Sharma had another name. They called her Wraith. Not because she was invisible, but because she moved like something caught between life and memory. Years before the events in the Hindu Kush, before the clipboard and the parka and the quiet eyes, she'd been embedded with a 5-person team deep in a region that didn't officially exist. A reconnaissance cell under the Special Activities Division, Operation Codename, Nightfall Serpent. The mission's purpose was clear. Locate an arms convoy moving through the serpentine passes of northern Karbad, a corridor rumored to fund half a war. Capture the intel. Exfil unseen. Simple on paper. Suicide in practice. The night before insertion, she remembered the feel of the air, heavy, electric, as if the mountains themselves were listening. Her team joked to hide the fear. She didn't. She never did. Captain Arjun Malik, the team lead, had leaned toward her across the dimly lit operations tent. "You're too serious, Sharma," he'd said with that soft grin soldiers use when they know they might die tomorrow. "Smile once before the ghosts take us." She had smiled once that night. Hours later, the helicopter had dropped them into a world of stone and shadow. No light, no backup, just 5 heartbeats and the low hum of encrypted radios. She'd been the comm specialist and sniper, a rare combination of precision and patience. Her role was to keep the line alive, to watch over them from distances that most men couldn't comprehend. For 2 days they tracked the convoy's path through ravines that seemed carved for ambushes. They moved like shadows, resting only when exhaustion became a physical weight. On the third night they found the convoy, a column of trucks idling below, engines muffled, headlights blacked out. 20 guards, maybe 30. Malik whispered through the mic, "You've got overwatch, Reyes." "Copy," she'd answered, breath steady despite the cold that gnawed her bones. She'd lined up the scope, saw movement, saw heat signatures, saw the pattern that didn't fit. Her instinct screamed. "Something's wrong," she said. "They're waiting." The words had barely left her lips when the world exploded. A mortar shell ripped through their ridge, shredding rock and snow into shrapnel. The team scattered, voices lost in static. She tumbled down the slope, her rifle slamming against her shoulder, vision fracturing between flashes of fire and darkness. When she came to, the night was burning. Malik's voice crackled once in her ear, a single word drowned in gunfire before the channel died. She crawled through smoke and blood until she reached the ridge's edge. Below, the trucks were gone. Her team was. 4 motionless shapes lay across the rocks. The enemy was already moving in to collect what remained. Her hands shook as she reloaded. She had 3 rounds left, enough to make them count. She didn't scream, didn't cry, she aimed. 3 shots, 3 bodies fell, then silence. When the last echo faded, she was alone. Completely alone. The cold didn't touch her after that. She dragged what she could of her team into cover, retrieved their identification tags, burned the rest. Standard protocol, deny the enemy evidence. Then she began to walk. 200 kilometers through hostile valleys and snow that bit like glass. She moved only at night, slept beneath ice, drank melted frost. At times she spoke aloud to no one, to Malik, to ghosts, to herself. "I'm coming home," she'd whisper. Days blurred. Her body gave up before her will did. On the 9th night she found an abandoned listening post left from another war. Inside, a rusted comm unit dead, except for a single analog channel. She rewired it with scavenged copper, powered it with the last battery cell from her thermal scope. The signal that escaped her transmitter that night would later be studied by communications engineers for years. They called it impossible. She called it survival. The rescue team found her 3 days later, half frozen, rifle still across her chest, eyes open. She didn't speak for nearly a month after that. The debriefers called it trauma. The psychologists called it dissociation. But Anna Sharma called it clarity. Because in silence the noise stopped. The blame, the politics, the justifications, all of it. In silence she could still hear Malik's voice, "Smile once before the ghosts take us." And she understood something terrible and beautiful. The ghosts never leave. You just learn to work with them. Years later, when she was reassigned to logistics, the file said for recovery. But what it really meant was containment. The kind of operator she'd been didn't fit in polite military circles. Too independent, too quiet, too aware of how decisions made in warm offices killed people in cold valleys. So they buried her in paperwork. And she let them. She thought maybe she could disappear there, drown in manifests and requisitions, until the noise of war became numbers on a page. Until the day she was sent to a remote base in the Hindu Kush. Until the day she met General Marcus Thorne. Back at Nightingale, days after the rescue, her past had begun to resurface in whispers. Technicians spoke about her name appearing in old classified networks. Pilots mentioned her call sign like a superstition, the wraith who saved Chimera. Sharma ignored it all. She filed reports, recalibrated sensors, repaired the same equipment that had once betrayed them. She didn't care for legends. Legends got people killed. But Thorne did care, because every whisper reminded him how wrong he'd been. He'd spent his whole career believing strength was loud, orders barked, fists slammed, courage measured by volume. Then she'd shattered that illusion with nothing but quiet competence. He found himself watching her from a distance, not out of curiosity, but out of a need to understand. He'd seen men break under far less pressure, yet she walked through the base like someone who carried ghosts without letting them show. One night, unable to sleep, he pulled her file again. The redacted lines taunted him. What kind of mission leaves a person with eyes that still scan every exit? What kind of woman rewires a satellite terminal under siege and doesn't flinch when death stares back? He didn't have answers, only questions that made him uncomfortable. 2 days after the rescue, a supply chopper came in from Bagram carrying a sealed envelope marked for Thorne's command. Inside was a commendation request from Central Command, a standard form asking for names to recommend for valor. He signed the usuals, Reyes, Evans, the pilots. Then he hesitated at the blank line that followed. He stared at it for a long time before writing a single word. Sharma. When he handed the envelope to the courier, he said quietly, "This one doesn't get lost." The man nodded, not understanding the weight of the order. That evening, Sharma sat alone in the warehouse, surrounded by stacked crates and the dull buzz of the heaters. She was cataloging new arrivals, mundane, routine, peaceful. Until she heard footsteps behind her. "Warrant officer." She turned slowly. Thorne stood there holding a file. He looked human, less stone, more regret. He extended it toward her. "Command wants a formal debrief. They're asking how you did it." Sharma took the file but didn't open it. "I sent a message, sir, that's all." Thorne gave a small, humorless laugh. "You sent a miracle through a storm." "Storms have patterns," she said simply. He studied her, the calm way she said it, as if chaos itself could be tamed by understanding. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. "To the field, I mean." She shook her head. "No." "Why not?" She looked past him, toward the hangar doors where the light bled in gray and soft. "Because the field never left." Thorne followed her gaze, seeing the truth in it. Every night she walked the base perimeter alone. Every day she checked the weather data, the supply routes, the wind speeds. She was still in the fight, just quieter about it. He wanted to say thank you again, but the words felt insufficient. Instead, he said, "I've put you in for commendation." Her eyes flicked to his, unreadable. "Don't." "It's deserved." "It's unnecessary." He frowned. "Why?" "Because recognition isn't redemption," she said. "It's decoration." Thorne opened his mouth, then closed it. She handed the file back to him. "Let the others have it. They earned it where it matters." He took the folder slowly. "And where that?" She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since the storm, "Where people can see it." And just like that, the conversation was over. She turned back to her work, her movements once again small, precise, steady. Thorne lingered a moment, then left. As the door closed, she allowed herself one quiet breath, deep and slow. Not relief, not pride, just release. That night in her quarters she dreamed. Not of Nightingale. Of the past. She saw Malik's face again. He was smiling, the same soft grin as before. "Smile once before the ghosts take us." In the dream she did, and for the first time the ghost smiled back. When she woke, dawn had crept through the frost-rimmed window. She sat up slowly, the cold biting her skin, and whispered into the still air, words meant for no one, or perhaps for everyone she'd ever lost. "I'm still here." She didn't cry, she didn't need to. The quiet was enough. Outside, the first transport of the day took off from the runway, its engines roaring into the sky. She watched it go, coffee steaming in her hands. The light caught the rising vapor and turned it gold. And somewhere in that golden breath of morning, Anna Sharma let herself believe, just for a second, that ghosts could rest too. What happens after survival? When the gunfire stops and the storm finally goes silent, what's left to fight? At Forward Operating Base Nightingale, life went on. The hum of generators returned, the sound of boots on gravel filled the mornings again, and reports began to pile up like snow against the walls. On the surface, everything looked the same. But underneath, something fundamental had shifted. The men of Task Force Chimera moved quieter now. They joked less, listened more. And when they passed Anna Sharma in the corridors or on the tarmac, they didn't look through her anymore. They looked to her. No one said it out loud, not in a place like this, but the base had started to move to her rhythm. Even Thorne. 3 days after the rescue, Thorne called for a staff meeting. The room was full: operators, officers, engineers, even logistics personnel. A rare blend of people who normally lived in separate worlds. He stood at the front, his hands clasped behind his back, but the usual bark in his voice was gone. When he spoke, it came measured, deliberate, like a man relearning how to talk. Task Force Chimera owes its survival to more than bravery, he began. It owes it to preparation and attention. There were a few puzzled looks. Thorne continued, eyes sweeping the room. The Hydra array failure wasn't random. It was sabotage, a tracking device hidden in the lens relay tampered with before arrival. A murmur spread through the ranks. "We missed it," he said simply. "We missed it because we were too focused on speed and not enough on scrutiny. That mistake cost lives." He paused, letting that truth settle like dust. "From now on," he said, voice firm but quieter than anyone had ever heard it, "we move differently. No detail too small, no specialist too quiet to be heard. Every mind here, every technician, quartermaster, mechanic is part of this machine. We survive together or not at all." He didn't mention her name. He didn't have to. Every eye in the room found Anna Sharma, standing near the back, arms folded, face impassive, as if she'd rather melt into the wall than be seen. But she was seen, for the first time truly seen. Reyes nodded once from across the room, a silent acknowledgement between soldiers who didn't need words. Evans looked down at his boots. The memory of his earlier mockery stung worse than the bullet wound healing in his shoulder. Thorne finished with a simple sentence. "Dismissed." No salutes, no cheers, just quiet understanding. Later that day, the airstrip was alive again, helicopters being refueled, ammunition crates being loaded. The next operation was already forming. Reyes found himself near the logistics bay, filling out an equipment checklist, something he'd once considered beneath him. Now, he handled each line like it mattered. Sharma was nearby, organizing a shipment. She moved with the same deliberate precision as always, pen moving across the clipboard like a conductor's baton. Reyes cleared his throat. "You know, the men have been calling you something." She didn't look up. "That's rarely good news." He smirked. "They call you the ghost in the wire." Her pen paused mid-stroke. "Catchy." "Fitting," he said. When she finally met his eyes, there was something unreadable in hers, amusement maybe, or quiet disbelief that anyone cared enough to give her a name that wasn't on a form. "Tell them to stop," she said. He grinned. "You know they won't." She sighed. "Soldiers love myths." Reyes nodded. "And sometimes we need them." He started to walk away, then stopped. "For what it's worth, ma'am, the myth's earned." Her answer was simple. So was the lesson. And he understood exactly what she meant. By the end of the week, the snow began to melt, just enough to expose the raw earth beneath. The storm had left scars everywhere: splintered antenna masts, half-buried tents, shattered equipment. But amid the wreckage, repair crews worked with a kind of quiet discipline that hadn't existed before. It was Sharma's influence, whether she knew it or not. She brought order to chaos, and it lingered. One evening, as the sky bled orange behind the peaks, she stood outside the communications shack, watching technicians rebuild the damaged tower. She gave no orders. She didn't need to. The team worked efficiently, mirroring the calm she carried like a shadow. Carlson approached, hands tucked in his parka pockets. "They're saying the storm that hit us was a once-in-a-decade event," he said. Sharma nodded absently. "Nature doesn't check calendars." Carlson smiled faintly. "You really don't like talking, do you?" "Talking overrated." He chuckled. "You and the general might actually agree on that now." Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "That's a first." Carlson hesitated, then added, "He's changed, you know, not just with you, with everyone. The way he listens now, it's different." "Listening easy," she said. "Hearing harder." Carlson studied her profile, the stillness, the patience. "You think he's hearing you?" She considered the question. The wind tugged gently at her hair. "I think he's trying." And for Sharma, that was enough. That night Thorne sat in his office alone. The heater hummed softly. The coffee beside him had gone cold hours ago. He was reviewing after-action reports, but his eyes weren't on the text. They were on a small object resting beside the files, a thermos, silver and dented from field use. He'd found it on his desk that morning, cleaned and refilled. No note. No acknowledgement. He didn't need one. He unscrewed the cap, the faint scent of strong black coffee rising with the steam. It wasn't just a drink anymore, it was a message, a continuation of the wordless dialogue they'd started days earlier. Respect didn't need a voice, it just needed to be kept warm. He took a slow sip and let the silence stretch. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like failure. It felt like peace. The following week brought new orders from command. Operation Iron Veil, a joint recon mission into a volatile border region. Thorne gathered the officers for briefing. Sharma was there too, standing quietly at the map table, her presence requested not as logistics support but as advisor. The room was tense, the plan complex. Supply routes cut through unpredictable weather zones, the kind of detail most commanders ignored until it killed someone. "Not Thorne, not anymore." "Warrant Officer Sharma," he said, gesturing to her, "run us through the terrain." A few officers exchanged surprised glances. No one expected her to take command of the map. But she did, calmly. She pointed to wind corridors, satellite blind spots, possible choke points for enemy ambush. She spoke in short, crisp sentences, her tone quiet but certain. When she finished, the room was silent. Even the skeptics couldn't argue. Thorne nodded. "Adjust accordingly. Mission parameters stand, but her analysis is law. If she says no go, we hold." The officers hesitated only a second before responding in unison. "Yes, sir." Thorne looked at her and saw the faintest flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. Not pride, not satisfaction, just a quiet understanding that the wheel had finally turned the right way. After the meeting, as the others filed out, Thorne stayed behind. He looked at the map still glowing faintly on the table. "You know, I used to think command was about certainty." "And now?" she asked. "Now I think it's about trust." Sharma tilted her head slightly. "Trust can't be ordered, sir." "No," he said, "it has to be earned." She looked at him for a long moment, "Then keep earning it." He smiled, a rare genuine thing, and said softly, "Yes, ma'am." The next morning, as helicopters lifted off for Iron Veil, Sharma stood on the tarmac, clipboard in hand. The cold bit at her cheeks, but she barely felt it. Reyes passed by on his way to the lead bird, pausing just long enough to murmur, "We'll bring them home." She gave a small nod. "You always do." He grinned, "You'll be watching anyway." She didn't deny it. As the aircraft roared into the pale sky, she felt the faint vibration under her boots, the pulse of engines. the rhythm of men and machines moving with purpose. For once, she didn't feel like an outsider. She was part of it, the unseen axis that kept it all turning. That evening, after the base quieted again, Thorne made his way back to the warehouse. The door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling through. Sharma was inside, sitting at her usual spot, cleaning her rifle in silence. He leaned against the doorway. "You ever think about why you stayed in?" She didn't look up. "Habit." "That all?" She set the cloth down, exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to be anything else." Thorne nodded. "Maybe you don't need to be." She looked up then, studying him, and for a fleeting second, something almost like relief passed between them, an understanding too fragile to name. He stepped forward, placed a sealed envelope on the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Transfer request, optional." "Optional?" He nodded. "Command, offering you a return to special operations, any unit you want." She stared at the envelope for a long moment, then softly, "And what if I stay?" Thorne smiled faintly. "Then you keep running this place the way you already are." She glanced at the envelope again. "I'll think about it." "That's all I ask." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "Whatever you choose, Sharma, the ghosts don't own you anymore." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. After he left, she sat there in silence, staring at the envelope. Her fingers traced its edges. The paper was light, but the weight inside it was enormous, a choice between past and present, between the person she was and the one she'd become. Outside, the wind had softened to a whisper. The mountains glowed silver under a full moon. She opened the thermos beside her, poured a small cup of black coffee, and let the steam curl upward into the cold. Maybe ghosts didn't leave. Maybe they just waited for peace, for purpose, for the moment someone finally forgave them. She raised the cup slightly, a silent toast to no one and everyone. Then she drank. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't taste like bitterness. What do you do when the past knocks, not as a memory, but as an order? For 3 nights the sealed envelope sat on Anna Sharma's desk, unopened, untouched, but never unnoticed. Every time she walked past it, she could feel it, a whisper in paper form, a reminder that no matter how far she'd come, the past was patient. It always waited for the quiet to return before speaking again. She tried to ignore it, tried to bury herself in the routines that kept her anchored, equipment manifests, weather forecasts, maintenance reports. But at night, when the base lights dimmed and the mountains turned to silhouettes, she'd catch herself staring at that envelope under the lamplight. Special operations. Return to field command. Any unit you want. Those words echoed like temptation, like danger. The same system that had once buried her was now asking her to return, as if the silence she'd fought to build wasn't hard-won, as if peace were something that could be revoked with a signature. On the 4th morning, she found Thorne waiting near the comms tower. He was sipping coffee, coat unbuttoned, his breath visible in the chill. He didn't look like a general anymore, just a man who'd spent too long standing in other people's storms. He nodded toward her. "Haven't heard from you." "I didn't realize I was supposed to report my thoughts now," she said dryly. He smiled faintly. "No report needed, just curious." Sharma crossed her arms, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I haven't decided." "Fair," he paused. "They'd be lucky to have you." She said nothing. "Do you miss it?" he asked quietly. She frowned. "What?" "The field, the chaos, the clarity that comes with danger." Her answer came slowly. "I don't miss the noise, I miss the purpose." Thorne nodded. "Maybe it's the same thing." "No," she said. "Purpose has weight, noise just fills space." The wind cut through their silence like a blade. Finally Thorne said, "Whatever you choose, make sure it's yours, not theirs, not mine, yours." Sharma looked at him, surprised. The general she'd met weeks ago would never have said that. "Noted," she said softly. He smiled, turned, and walked away, leaving her alone with the cold, and with the question she still didn't want to answer. That evening, she took the envelope and slipped it into her jacket. No decision, just movement. She walked out past the barracks, past the motor pool, to the far edge of the perimeter, where the base fence met the frozen ridge. From there the world stretched endlessly, valleys black with shadow, peaks glittering with frost, the stars sharp as glass. This was where she went when she needed to think. And think she did. She thought about the first time she'd fired a weapon, the weight of the trigger, the sound that tore through innocence like paper. She thought about Malik, his grin, his last words, the fire that followed. She thought about the faces she couldn't save, and the ones who never learned her name. And she thought about Nightingale, about Reyes's laughter returning after loss, about Thorne's hesitant change, about the way silence here didn't hurt anymore. Wasn't that purpose? Wasn't that enough? She pulled the envelope from her jacket, the paper stiff in the cold air. Her thumb hovered over the seal. And then from behind her, a sound. Footsteps fast, urgent. She turned sharply, instinct taking over before thought. Reyes, out of breath, his face drawn tight. "Ma'am, we've got a problem." The next minutes blurred. She was in the command tent, light flickering against tense faces. Thorne stood over the operations console, jaw set. A drone feed showed a black plume of smoke, rising from a narrow gorge 10 kilometers east. One of the Iron Veil recon team's Bravo element had gone dark. Last transmission, contact with hostiles. The storm front that had been approaching had cut off air support. Ground rescue was risky, too risky. "Evac windows closing," Carlson said, voice strained. "If we don't move now, they'll be trapped." Thorne looked around the room, weighing options, the kind that killed men. "We can't fly blind into that valley. Comms are jammed." "Unless," Reyes said slowly, looking at Sharma, "we build another Phoenix." The room fell silent. Thorne's eyes found hers. Her voice was steady. "We don't have the materials." "Not all," Reyes said, "but enough to patch something short-range." Carlson interjected, "You'd have to run it manually from the ridge. No cover, no backup, you'd be exposed." Sharma didn't blink. "Then I'll do it." Thorne took a step forward. "You don't have to." She looked at him, calm, resolute. "That's what you said last time." Their eyes locked, understanding, shared and silent. Finally Thorne nodded. "All right, Reyes, you're with her. Evans, prep a med team on standby. We move in 20. The decision had been made. The ghosts had found her again, and this time she wasn't running. The ridge was colder than before, the wind sharper, cutting through layers of fabric and flesh alike. They carried what little they had: stripped comm parts, rewired signal boosters, power cells scavenged from broken drones. The climb took an hour. By the time they reached the overlook, the storm had begun to crawl in, a wall of white swallowing the valley below. Reyes set down the pack. "If we're doing this, we need a link now or never." Sharma was already kneeling, assembling the equipment with mechanical precision. Her hands moved fast but sure, fingers bare despite the cold. Reyes glanced at her. "You've done this before." "Too many times." He smiled faintly. "You're a strange kind of fearless, you know that." "I'm not fearless," she said, tightening a wire. "I'm just done being afraid." He didn't have a response for that. The device hummed to life, a weak signal flickering between frequencies. "Phoenix Ridge, this is Nightingale Command," she said into the mic. "Respond, Bravo element, do you copy?" Static. Then a faint voice, barely audible. "Copy, wounded, pinned under, fire." Reyes leaned forward. "That's them." Sharma adjusted the dial, her breath fogging against the mic. "Hold position, Bravo, help's coming." Thorne's voice came through next, faint but steady. "We've got your signal, Sharma. Drones picking up heat signatures. Guidance incoming." "Copy command, make it fast." The wind howled, nearly swallowing her words. Lightning flashed somewhere far to the east. Reyes checked his rifle. "If they track the signal." "They will," she said. "Then what?" Sharma looked up at the storm and smiled, a small, sad smile. "Then they'll have to find me first." Minutes stretched, each second a knife's edge. The signal flickered again. She adjusted the alignment, shielding it from the wind with her body. "Hold," she whispered, "hold." The sound of distant rotor blades broke through the static. "Rescue birds." Reyes exhaled. "They're coming." "Keep the link steady," she said. He nodded, working the power cell while she managed the frequency. The storm thickened, visibility dropping to near zero. Suddenly, a sharp crack. A round snapped past, shattering a rock near her shoulder. "Contact," Reyes shouted, diving for cover. Sharma stayed low, eyes scanning the ridge through the haze. Another shot, then another. She couldn't see them, only the flashes. "Two hostiles, maybe three," Reyes said, voice tight. "Keep the signal alive," she ordered. "What about you?" She loaded her sidearm. "I'll keep them busy." He grabbed her arm. "You're not bulletproof, ma'am." "No," she said, "just stubborn." Before he could argue, she was already moving, slipping between rocks, low and deliberate. The snow muffled everything except the beat of her own heart. Another shot whined past. She dropped, rolled, fired twice. The flashes disappeared. For a moment, nothing but the roar of wind. Then silence. She waited, counted her breaths. And finally, Reyes's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Bravo team, on board. Birds are clear." Her exhale trembled, half relief, half exhaustion. "Good," she said softly. The storm swallowed her voice whole. By the time they made it back to base, night had fallen. The wind had calmed. Reyes walked ahead, blood seeping from a graze along his shoulder, but grinning anyway. Sharma followed, slower, each step deliberate, her body aching in every muscle but her expression calm. When they entered the operations tent, Thorne was waiting. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "They did it, we just kept the line open." He studied her, the snow in her hair, the faint streak of soot across her cheek. "You could have died out there. Wouldn't be the first time." He sighed, shaking his head. "You don't make it easy, do you?" "Easy doesn't last." For a moment, their eyes met, understanding flowing in the silence between words. Thorne finally said, "Command wants an update tomorrow. I'll handle it, you rest." She nodded, already turning away. "Sharma," he called softly. She stopped. He hesitated, then said, "Next time, let someone else be the ghost." She gave the faintest smile. "Maybe." Then she walked out into the night. Back in her quarters, she hung her jacket, washed the grit from her hands, and sat on the bunk. The envelope still waited on her desk, crumpled now, smudged from travel. She opened it. The words were simple. Formal. Cold. Reassignment. Special Operations Command. She stared at them for a long time. Then she folded the paper once, neatly, and placed it in the small metal bin beside her desk. A moment later, she struck a match. The flame caught easily, curling the edge into black smoke. She watched until it was nothing but ash. Then she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, "I already have my unit." The wind outside carried the words away, gentle and final. And for the first time in years, the ghosts didn't whisper back. What remains when the mission ends, metals or memory? Weeks passed. The snow melted into rivers that carved through the valleys like veins of silver. Spring crept over forward operating Base Nightingale in small, stubborn gestures. The first green blades between gravel, the hum of insects where silence used to live. War, for a brief moment, seemed far away. But it was still there. It always was. Every morning the base woke to the same rhythm, choppers warming, boots crunching, orders murmured over weak coffee. Yet underneath that routine, something had changed permanently. Men who once shouted now listened. Those who once mocked now learned. And in the quiet between drills, when the generators hummed and the wind scraped against the tents, someone would always mention her name softly, like a prayer. Anna Sharma had become part of the base's language, not its command. Its conscience. She never asked for that. She didn't even notice it at first. But the signs were everywhere. A mechanic double-checked wiring before powering new equipment. Sharma check, they called it. Reyes started training rookies to operate comms backups, teaching them the patience she'd drilled into him. Even Thorne, once the loudest voice in every room, now walked the base like a man listening for something only silence could teach. It was on one of those mornings, golden light spilling over the ridges, that Sharma found herself summoned to the briefing hall. She expected orders. Instead, she found faces. Dozens of them, pilots, medics, engineers, operators, filling the narrow space, their expressions somewhere between gratitude and reverence. At the front stood Thorne. He looked uneasy, like a man standing before something sacred. In his hand, a single small box. "Warrant Officer Anna Sharma," he began. His voice didn't carry command this time. It carried respect. "You don't want this," he said, opening the box to reveal the dull gleam of a metal. "You didn't ask for it, but this base owes you more than we can ever repay." He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "You taught us something we should have already known, that leadership isn't noise, it's listening. That survival isn't luck, it's discipline. And that strength." He paused, looking at her. "Doesn't have to shout." He extended the metal toward her. She stared at it, at the way it caught the light like a mirror, reflecting not pride but memory. Her hand didn't move. "I don't deserve it," she said quietly. Thorne smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but you earned it." The room was silent. Finally, she reached out and took it, not like an award, but like a weight she accepted for all those who couldn't. There was no applause, just stillness. And somehow that felt right. Later that day, she stood outside the hangar watching the horizon. The air smelled of dust and thawing earth. Reyes joined her, a familiar grin tugging at his face. "Still here," he said. "Still standing," she replied. He nodded toward the medal hanging from her neck. "Looks good on you." She gave a soft snort. "It's heavy." "That's how you know it's real." They stood there for a long time, watching a cargo plane taxi down the strip, its engines humming like a low heartbeat. "Command, sending a new unit next week," Reyes said. "Rotation change, you staying?" She looked toward the mountains, blue-gray, endless. "I think so." He grinned. "Good, this place feels wrong without you haunting it." She shook her head, but there was warmth in her eyes. "Go do your job, Sergeant." "Yes, ma'am," he said, mock salute and all. As he walked off, she found herself smiling, small, genuine, unexpected. That night, Thorne found her sitting by the comms tower again, same place where everything had begun. He carried 2 cups of coffee. Steam drifted between them, curling in the cold. "Figured you'd be here," he said, handing her one. "You figured right." They sat in silence for a while, the lights of the base flickering below them like constellations misplaced on Earth. Thorne took a slow sip. "You know, before you came, I thought leadership meant being the loudest voice in the room. And now I know it means shutting up long enough to hear the right one." She chuckled softly. "Progress." He smiled. "You planning to stay?" "For now." "Good." He looked at her, the lines on his face softer than they'd ever been. "This place runs better when you're around." She shrugged. "It runs fine. people just stopped pretending they're invincible. That's because you showed them it's okay not to be. She didn't reply, she just looked out at the stars. You ever think about what comes next? He asked. All the time, she said, but I stopped expecting answers. Thorne nodded. Maybe that's the point. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint hum of a distant chopper. She turned to him, eyes thoughtful. You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't yelled that day? He exhaled slowly. Every damn night. Don't, she said gently. It needed to happen. He frowned. How could it possibly need to? Because some lessons only stick when they hurt. Her tone wasn't sharp, wasn't forgiving either, just honest. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, You're not just saving people out there, Sharma. You're saving us in here. She didn't answer, but her gaze softened, an acknowledgement that she'd heard him, and that it was enough. Weeks turned into months. The rotation came and went. Nightingale changed faces, missions, seasons, but certain things remained. The plaque on the comms wall bore 5 names now, the men she'd saved from the ravine, and the 4 she'd lost long before. Reyes added a 6th line below them, in small, careful letters. Because someone kept the line open. No one knew if Sharma saw it, but one morning, fresh coffee appeared beside the plaque, steaming, black, no note attached. That was enough. One evening, as the sun sank behind the ridges, Sharma stood outside the hangar doors watching a training flight return. The roar of engines cut through the thin air, fading into quiet. Beside her, Carlson said, You ever think we'll see peace? Sharma smiled faintly. Peace isn't something you see, it's something you keep. He tilted his head. How do you keep it? By choosing it, she said, every day. He looked at her, at the stillness, the calm, and realized he was looking at someone who'd made that choice 1,000 times already. She started to walk away, then stopped. Carlson. Yeah. Next time the comms go down, make sure there's coffee ready. He grinned. Always, ma'am. And she disappeared into the glow of the hangar lights, her silhouette fading into gold and shadow, half myth, half memory. That night, Thorne sat in his quarters writing his final report for Central Command. His transfer was approved, promotion to Regional Command. He paused halfway through the report, staring at the line, Personnel Commendation, Warrant Officer Anna Sharma. He tapped the pen against the desk, then smiled and wrote beneath it, in neat block letters. Recommend retention at FOB Nightingale, essential to unit morale and operational integrity. Then in smaller handwriting, words he knew no one would ever read. She taught us to survive the silence. He closed the folder and leaned back, exhaling deeply. For the first time in decades, the weight of command didn't feel heavy. It felt shared. Outside, the night was still. In the comms shack, lights blinked softly, keeping rhythm with the pulse of distant signals bouncing through the cold, thin air. Sharma sat inside, headset resting on the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. The radio hissed gently, the same hum that once haunted her now soothed her. She adjusted one last dial, watching the signal strengthen, clean and steady. No interference. No noise. Just connection. She leaned back, letting her eyes close for a moment, and thought about Malik, about the ghosts she'd carried all this way. For the first time, she didn't see their faces in the dark. She heard their voices instead, laughter, not blame. And she whispered, barely audible. Line still open. Morning broke with a soft gold light spilling across the valley. The mountains, for once, seemed at peace. Thorne stood outside his office, watching the flag rise slowly against the wind. Reyes jogged past, shouting something about fuel logs, and somewhere nearby, someone laughed, a sound that felt almost foreign here. The base was alive again. Sharma stepped out of the comms shack, squinting against the sun. She paused, took a deep breath, And for the first time in years, she felt it, not victory, not absolution, but something quieter, stronger. Stillness. She looked at the horizon and smiled, just once. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And the world listens, even when it doesn't know it's listening.